And welcome back to Survivor 42 and 42. We just wrapped up season 37, David versus Goliath. We've got Natalie currently talking in the reunion and talking about her edit, and I love Natalie on this rewatch, but we'll get to that. We are joined today by a very large panel, including Emily. Welcome.
Hi. I
Going
missed
from how
you.
you guys are on my miss you too. Going how you guys are on my screen, Julia. Julia, what is your Survivor hot take?
For this season, I would say my hot take is how they split up who is a David and who is a Goliath. Because I think in certain instances it was based purely on are you physically large or are you not? And I think there's a lot more that can make someone a David or a Goliath. So I do think that that's something that potentially could have been tweaked or my hot take for the season.
Davey?
Where's Davey? My hot take is honestly, I think Elizabeth should have gone a little further.
Wow. Okay. And Ben?
I think my hot take, so I might be wrong, but this is the first season I obviously noticed that they got bug spray, and then they later got a fire kit and tarp in tree mail. I just was like, there was a lack of Survivor in this season. It was kind of, more about the storyline.
Yet they almost got killed by a storm halfway through the pre-merge. So,
but they still gave them so much. I mean,
they did. And what I'll say is this, and I'm just going to kind of pick up from where I've left off over the last few days of the problems that I saw in the 30s. This time around, the problems that I've seen, the editing issues where a lot of players are just being heavily under-edited to the point where you don't know they exist, even though everyone is saying in this season, Allison's a threat, Allison's a threat. And it's like, well, we're not seeing that. So, obviously she is, but because we're not seeing it, we have a hard time seeing Allison's game. The editing, the influx of idols and advantages, which I do feel like works a lot better in this season, because that's not the storyline of this season. The storyline's not all of these idols and advantages. It's the Davids versus Goliaths going into the merge. The Goliaths keep saying, we're gonna eventually make this game fluid, and the Davids basically forced their hand with those two tribal councils back to back, where they play those advantages and those idols, and then the game just goes completely off the rails in the best way possible. So as we start the season, I know Julia brought it up at the beginning. We'll go with Davey first. What did you think, looking at the cast, did you think there were any glaring mistakes, I guess, based off of what you learned about their personality, as far as Davids and Goliaths?
I think for the most part, they cast really great tribes. I think, Natalie Napalm definitely deserved to be on Goliath. I think that Nick's story put him in a really good spot on David. And, I think maybe in the beginning, I was a little unsure of why Mike White was on Goliath. And yeah, I think they did a mostly great job. I think there were some question marks, like also Kara. I didn't know why she was on her tribe, but it did work out.
You gotta put the pretty people in one tribe. No, it's fun. I'm messing. Ben, being the person that has watched this the most recently, fresh, what were your expectations going into this based off of the other themed seasons that we had basically in the 30s of, blue collar, no collar, white collar, heroes, healers, hustlers. I think we had Blood versus Water, but Blood versus Water is a fine twist. So what did you expect going into this season? Did you think it was going to be just a bunch of nerds versus a bunch of jocks, or did you think they were actually going to mix it in?
Well, so I thought going in, I was most excited for this season since probably Game Changers. I really like Game Changers. But I kind of knew this was going to be an awesome season because Julia has mentioned before she's in love with Christian and just everything that he does. So I was,
which we all should be. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. It's just a fact.
But yeah, no, I was definitely very excited for this season. I kind of feel like it was interesting how early on it seemed the Davids got like little advantages in some of the competitions, and then it kind of equaled out after that, from what I remember. It's kind of my impressions early on.
Julia, we're introduced to Christian very early in the season, and as one of two Christian stands that we have here, like obsessed with, what was it about Christian in those open moments, or did he have to grow on you?
Oh no, immediately you open up with the way he speaks and the algorithms that he writes for slide puzzles. As a PhD candidate myself, I'm in that world, like the science world. He is my people, and I love it. And it's very rare to see, I think, someone from the PhD world in a type of environment where they're able to articulate science in a way that gets it across to people and makes it cool and funny and something cool to talk about. And that's why he initially just grabbed my heart. I'm like, oh, he is wearing his like science badge on his sleeve and no shame about it. And I just adored it. And I think it was that personal connection as well, that the fact that what I do day to day is very similar to his backstory. And it just initially, like, I was like, oh, you're one of my people. I love this.
And I also like.
Yeah, Emily, go.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just
No.
really obsessed with
I was
Christian.
going to go to you. I was going to go to you. So
I have lots of things to say about Christian because he's one of my top 5 favorite Survivor players of all time. It's very true. I think that, like, going off of what you said, Julia, like, he has this very, like, archaic, like, transition or, like, metamorphosis, I guess, like, throughout the entire season. Like, he starts off so vulnerable and so relatable in a lot of different ways where we can all pull pieces of. Like, you pull pieces of, like, the fact that he was, like, this big scientist and, like, you know, he talks about, like, puzzle algorithms, all that stuff. Like, for me, I could just, like, sense that he felt out of place and out of pocket, but he was trying his best just to be present and to be loved, you know, and I loved that piece from him, you know. For me, like, what really gripped on is just, like, how he evolved, kind of similar, like, in a Cochran way, where he had, like, one really big challenge win, and that huge challenge win really helped to kind of develop him into, like, this huge hero that people were rooting for to make it to the end. I remember just, like, shouting at my screen, like, every single vote that he made, and I was like, he's gonna win. This is his winner's edit. And obviously that wasn't the case, but, like, he's a vision. We love him.
Well, and the Christian problem is he's sussed out so early as, you know, a smart threat that when he becomes the social threat and at one point the physical threat, he's basically fucked unless he wins every immunity or finds more than the idol that he played at 8 or 9. I can't remember off the top of my head. So, and I do think that that's, you know, that is a testament to his game that he was able to do that. But I also feel like if he were to come back, he might play sort of a Nick game where he does kind of do the under the radar type gameplay because he was just very out in the open from the very beginning.
I think so with someone like that, I think it would be so hard for him to play under the radar because so much of what makes him a threat is the fact that he's clearly extremely intelligent, but also very social. And those are two things that I think you can't hide when you're in that environment. I think about, like, you know, in my day-to-day life, I just bring up science all the time because that's my life. And he would do that probably naturally too in that kind of environment. And I think it would just be so hard to be that passionate about it and just live in that world and not have it come across. So I think unfortunately, especially as we've seen with Cochran and his absolute dominance of the show, it's very hard to come in and be in any way Cochran-esque and not be seen as a threat.
And I also think that it's, like, such a testament, like, to the metamorphosis of the game of Survivor, like a Cochran or a Christian, like, how they would have been perceived at the start of, or like old school Survivor, they wouldn't be the same kind of threat. But, like, who would have thunk someone like thunk is thunk a word? I don't know. But, like, Christian was a triple threat by the time that he was voted out. He was a physical threat because he already had an immunity. He was most certainly a social threat, and he was a strategic threat because he had himself embedded in so many different alliances: the Brochacho alliance, the Mason-Dixon alliance, the David-Goliath alliance. Like, there's just so many different pieces, which really speaks to, like, any winner of Survivor can be anyone as long as you are able. It's a matter of, like, once you strip someone from the resources, what they can do to work with what they have, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I love Christian. I hope to see him back one day. But that I can say that about a lot of people on this cast, which gets me to my next question. Davey, who are some of the players, besides Christian or including Christian, that you found yourself really relating to in the pre-merge portion of the game?
Um, I was really in love with this pre-jury of this game. I think that Pat is also a New Yorker. Love New York. I was feeling really sad for B when she had to quit because I know how much like when you get cast on the show, you just like will put everything out there, and you also are balancing like your real life too. And she had to make that decision to like step away because of her injury. I mean, I'm such a Natalie stan. I can't even say anything more. And Lyrsa, I feel like this is someone that had so much more game to play. And looking at the boot list, it was really hard. Like this was such a great cast. There's a reason why when people are like, oh, I want to watch Survivor. What shows like which season should I watch? People recommend David versus Goliath for this cast.
Yeah, I think it's as far as newbie casts, I would say, post season 20, this is probably the best, maybe besides Kagyan. As far as like just top to bottom, I will say that I forgot that Jessica existed, but she played her role this time around, where I'm probably never going to forget Jessica again. But top to bottom, you have the Pat evacuation at the beginning of the season. Pat, who lives like 10 minutes down the road from me, which is insane. You have the Pat evacuation, which saves Nick from potentially going home that episode, and to watch it, with that in your mind of Nick's going to win this, it's fun to watch that storyline progress. So when I watched this season the second time, that's how he's the one whose eyes I watched through. This time, though, I watched through Angelina's and Mike White's because they were the runners up, and I feel like Angelina gets a lot of flack in the community, specifically the casuals. As far as she has no gameplay, she's horrible, this, that, and the other. When in reality, Angelina had a good idea of what was going on most of the time. Her issue was she couldn't shut her fucking mouth most of the time. Ben, what were your thoughts on Angelina?
So every season I pick blindly who my winner and my runner up is after the second episode, and half the time I know like nothing about them, so it's a blind guess. I picked Angelina as my runner up pick, purely because I thought she was like decisive and was going to try to work people over, and I thought she'd be interesting. I was trying to root for her like the whole season, and just some of the stuff was incredible. I mean, when she would just call people out and just say things that was just like she couldn't read the room, just too intense. She could not tone it down enough to be relevant.
Nick, I have a question, or not Nick. What am I saying? No, I'm not thinking Nick. Ben, I have a question for you about that.
Yeah.
Can I borrow your jacket?
Which?
Jacket. Oh, yeah.
What jacket?
No,
sorry, man. Broker's Natalie to go get the jacket for her. Like
that was so good.
I honestly think that Jacket Gate, just that storyline in that episode, is more, entertaining than a lot of things that we have seen throughout the third. Not to say that the 30s have not been entertaining, but Jacket Gate just all by itself, and it all comes to a head at that tribal council where Angelina knows that Natalie is going home, and she just throws a vote on Lyrsa to try to hoodwink Natalie into giving her jacket. And Queen Natalie, sticks to her guns and says, I don't know if she was a part of it, so I don't need to give it to her. So I'm going to wear it right here on my vote out confessional. She smiles, and she goes along with her merry way. But Angelina, the first time I watched it, it was like, oh, okay, I get it. But every other time I've watched it since then, she's this fun, chaotic character. And I feel like every season needs these fun, chaotic characters, whether you want to root for them or not. I'm not a Coach fan, but when he's on screen, it's like, okay, the chaos is fun. But you're always inevitably rooting for them, in my opinion, rooting for them to see their downfall. With Angelina, it was different because You saw that she was trying to do these things, and her perception was, I got the rights for the tribe, so I had to climb a 20-foot ladder to do this. I had to tell Elizabeth that she was going home to get her jury vote. So you can see that she's playing the game. Whether she's playing it the right way or wrong way, we can't say because there is no right or wrong way to play the game. But you can tell that she's playing hard. With her making that fake idol at Final Five to try to make, God, I forgot her name. Who's fifth place? Someone.
Kara?
No, she's
No,
fourth.
Carol was
Allison.
fourth.
Allison. She tries to make Allison look stupid by playing a fake idol. Allison acknowledges that this is a fake idol and plays it anyway, just in case it's not. And then Angelina goes up and says, "Yes, I can't believe I made such an amazing fake idol. Blah blah blah. Here's my real idol." And you have Gabby sitting on the jury, like, I can't believe she's still talking about this. I feel like
I
Angelina.
also,
Go ahead.
like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be a jerk. I'm sorry. Like, I just have so much to say. Like, I also like wonder about like if we would have even known a lot of like this part of the edit if she wasn't the chosen villain edit for that specific season. You know what I mean? Like, would there have been more of an edited shock value? Specifically with what's her name? Why can't I can see her face? Not Abby. What's her name?
Angelina?
No.
Who are
Who's
we
the girl
talking?
with the fake idol?
Allison.
Allison. We just talked about that.
We keep forgetting about Allison,
I feel
which is what
so
production
bad.
wants us
Well,
to
it's
do.
also
Justice
but
for
like,
Allison.
Justice for Allison.
yeah. Would there have been like like a lot of build up and like would they have included all that commentary had they not wanted Angelina to have that villain edit? Like, would Jeff Probst have corrected her whenever she said that she climbed up like a 200-foot ladder publicly, in the final like reunion thing, had she not been the villain, So I think that we also have to look at that like from a critical lens of like she could have also had very much a winner's edit.
It could have, but I think the difference is though, it's not like she was not like it's not like she was a dumb player. She's definitely strategic, but socially she was just so bad at understanding how to relate to people, understanding how she comes across. And I think as much as you can say someone gets a villain edit, she still had to do and say all of those
for
things.
Sure. But
so
I would also, so go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just think it's someone who clearly is a strategic player because she was really the only Goliath that jumped over and worked with the Davids. She read that absolutely correctly. But then when you go and make a fake idol for someone and have to brag about it, it's like, well, if you're bragging about it, then it clearly wasn't that good of a play.
It was not.
Like, and it just makes you look mean and it makes you look vindictive. And I think it's just a lack of genuine understanding about how she comes across to other people. And I think that is just something that's impossible to hide, especially when you're totally stripped down. And then, you're thinking you're getting all of this material. Even if she won, I think you would include those moments because you couldn't not include them and understand what was happening in the show.
No, I completely agree with that. I just think that like every person could have gotten a villain edit had they been able to utilize all of the different footage they had for every single person for 24 hours a day, like 39 days. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so Mike White could potentially get one.
Yeah.
Release the Mike White edit. So as we get to the swap, and right before we get to the merge, I just want to point out, this is probably my favorite swap of any season where I didn't care that they swapped. I wasn't angry because I felt like the game was already starting to become very fluid, and I knew that it wasn't just going to be, let's just pick off whoever's in the minority on this tribe. But we do, and I don't know how I forgot this, on Nick's swap tribe, their final three in that swap tribe end up being the final three of the game, but they take three totally different paths to get there that you almost forget every single time that they finished the pre-merge together. So we hit the merge. Everyone has built all these bonds with the swaps, and Goliath are straight up telling everyone, like, hey, if you guys give us Elizabeth, we're going to become fluid. Like, we promise you. We all want Elizabeth gone anyway, so let's just go with this. Davey, why did they all want Elizabeth gone? you were the one that said that you think she should have lasted a little bit longer. So what do you think got her in the end?
Her attire.
I think it's just not being able to socially ingratiate herself. I think that she was a little jarring to some of the players, Carl. And I think that I think when you get into the merge, you have to turn your social game up, and unfortunately, Elizabeth wasn't able to do that, and it got the best of her.
Do y'all, and anyone can answer this question, do y'all think that these Goliaths, because they're telling, they're telling these Davids this, do y'all think that they just plan on just continuing to feed them this same bullshit over and over again and then pick them off? Or do you feel like if their hands weren't forced at the next 2 rounds, that the game still could have been fluid? So I guess basically what I'm asking is, did these advantages force the game to become fluid, or do you think that the game was already going down that road? And anyone can chime in for this.
I think personally.
What did you say, Julie?
I just said I think it forced the fluidity, those advantages, because I really do think, like, unlike if you're in a non-themed season, I think it's much more likely that people from an old tribe will work with people from a new tribe. As soon as you give the season a theme, you're giving everyone a unifying factor on the two teams. And I think it makes it a lot less likely that they'll break from their group, because you've already been labeled, you all have this in common, you're Goliaths. You all have this in common, you're Davids, you're the underdogs, you need to stick together and prove that you can beat the Goliaths. So when you give people those unifying factors, I think it's a lot less likely that you'll have this intermingling until you're almost forced to, versus when you're on randomized teams at the beginning, it's just a color. Versus now it's, you have this unifying trait that we are giving to you and assigning to you. And in that sense, people, I think, are a lot less likely to flip when they don't have to.
Davey?
Retweet. Like, no, that was just like so well said. Like, I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that. I think the next 2 rounds are pivotal. Like, there's no way. I think that the fluidity had to have been forced, because it seemed it was going in one direction, and unless those advantages were flushed and used, I just don't see how it would have happened organically.
And this is where the season really picks up. As a person that's not a fan of advantages, I love, these are probably my 2 favorite tribal councils of the season, besides maybe, oh yeah, Christian idling out Gabby. But the reason is because these Davids are in a minority in both situations, and they played all of their advantages. I think in total it was 4 through 2 tribals, maybe 5, but they played them all correctly and send people home. And the Goliaths are at this point, trying to turn on Angelina, and that gets them caught. That gets Alex sent home eventually, and then the Davids, who always wanted to play this fluid game, start turning on themselves, and that's what eventually pisses off Nick, our winner of the season. So Ben, Nick guy, no, what did you enjoy about him, if anything?
He wasn't that memorable of a winner for me. Like his story was interesting.
I thought he was going to end it there. He wasn't memorable.
He definitely ended up having like a striking story, like once you start to get to know him. But I mean, he also was probably going to be the first one voted out if Pat doesn't break his back, which was, that injury hurt me. Like I watched that live and like I wanted to go to the chiropractor. Like my back was killing me after watching that. But I don't know. It's an interesting thought that he might have gotten voted out first if that injury doesn't happen.
Emily, do you feel like? Oh, I thought you were making a face. Do you feel like? Yeah, obviously Nick is saved there, but let's say somehow Nick isn't voted out at that round. Let's say Pat stays, whatever. Do you feel like what we got from Nick this season would have eventually gotten him as far as he did? We don't say when, but like mid to late merge, or do you think he's still always going to be a pre-juror based off of things we may have seen?
God. If I had to rank my favorite winners, just again, this is based on the capability of the edit and the like monumental moves.
Just say it, coward.
He doesn't even give me like top 20 vibes, but that's not a stab at him. I also think that it's also a component of like the edit and also just like the capability and the room to be able to provide like big moves. I know you hate that word, but that's true, you know. Nick won for a lot of reasons at the end, in my opinion. I feel like the theme of the season gave him that culpability to be able to win, because at the end of this, the biblical story is David slays Goliath, and that in itself is a very, very big component of the theme and the emotion. I also think, I mean, he's a lawyer, isn't he? So I think that in itself like really helped with like that emotional appeal and knowing how to appeal to a variety of people. He played a long game where he very, very much. Kim says it's giving Veggie Tales. Kim, I love you. You heard it live. So, like, to me, I feel like he's not going to be. I know he returned for Winners of War. I don't think he'll ever come back. I don't think that he's been that monumental of a player.
Julia, thoughts on Ben? Or Ben, God.
All right, Ben, let me tell you what I think about you.
Ben and Nick.
No, I kind of agree. I think it harkens back kind of to what I said earlier about how a themed season can dictate a lot. And I think actually that Mike played an amazingly strategic game. He was watching it a second time, because I watched all of these seasons live, and now I'm doing the rewatch with Ben as he watches them for the first time. So it's kind of cool to know how far people get and to really start to pay attention to people that I know are interesting earlier that I might not have paid attention to as much. And Mike was behind the scenes on a lot of strategy that I think people for some reason saw him as a villain. I think in this game, when you're strategic, you're seen as villainous sometimes. And I think he just was very strategic. And I do think if you take away this David versus Goliath theme, I think Mike gets a few more votes and a little more credit for what he did versus Nick. I think the theme, like exactly what Emily said, kind of swung some of the jury in Nick's favor.
Can I add one other piece to that? Because like you're 100% right. Like I think that the other thing with Nick's like piece is like most of his season, because of the theme, the one versus the other, I also feel like he was pretty overshadowed by Christian and Christian's edit up until he was voted out, which was what, like the final seven, something like that?
7.
Yeah. Oh my God, was I right? Oh my God, I'm a genius. So like he was overshadowed up until he was pretty much at the final end by Christian's edit. So like even if he played an incredible game, which he did, I mean he won, there was no way to be able to root for him in the same capacity as we did with Christian.
Yeah, and I would say that Mike White, the two things that I always remember about Mike White in this season. One, all of his drunk faces, which are classic. If you don't have any Mike White GIFs, or memes on your phone, you need to go and Google, download them. Two, he was in the middle of, he was the swing vote in a lot of different situations. And I feel that is a testament to not only his strategic game, but his social game, that people are not, instead of going after him, he is constantly in the middle of, okay, this is what I'm going to do this time, this is what I'm going to do this time. And I think it really helped him get to the end. Now, do I feel like, I feel like at the end, Nick pulling off the 3 immunities, Nick being the last David standing, Nick, being a part of those 2 big blind sides at the middle of the merge, I feel like his game was looked at as better in that situation. Everyone knows me. I don't believe in robbed players ever. We just had Naomi here yesterday who hosts Mike White was robbed. But I don't feel like Mike, could have done anything better than what he did, because I do think he played a great game. Just sometimes great games don't get you the win in the end. And we see that with the jury, where the jury is also very fluid. Nick doesn't get all of the David votes. Christian votes for Mike because he feels like he was more strategic.
Mm-hmm.
Nick gets all of the Goliath votes except for Kara and Allison. So I feel like even at the end of the game, where people might want to go back to the old tribal lines, people paid more attention to the people as players, rather than, these OG tribe lines that really don't matter. They really shouldn't matter. I'll just say it.
I think when you talk about the distribution of jury votes, that's something that I did want to point out that I think is very interesting, is that I think if you just compare their strategic games, I think Mike had a better strategic game than Nick. And players that go deeper in the game, I think, tend to understand and reward that more. So I always think it's interesting to look at when you look at the breakdown of jury votes, who the most recently voted out players voted for. And I think those were all of the Mike votes, were all of the players that had to get to a point to be deceitful and use strategy and blindside and weren't bitter. And I think those jury votes all went to Mike, the most recently voted out people. And so I think that's a very interesting tell to the fact that some of the jurors might have been bitter or might not have understood or respected the strategy as much because they didn't have to do it. They never got to a point where they had to use it and experience it. And I think that's always an interesting split to see jury votes based off of when they got voted out.
Ghost Island, the first 5 people out vote for Dom. No, first 5 people out vote for Dom. Last 5 vote for Wendell.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about that.
Davey, as we start to wrap up, where do you, watching David versus Goliath, it is one of these more recent seasons. Historically, do you look highly on it? Do you think that it's overrated, or do you think that by the time Survivor is done, David versus Goliath will be in a lot of people's top 5 all time?
I think, well, first, there's obviously old school and new school. So I think old school would not necessarily look at this as like a top tier season. I do want to give it its roses because a cast of compelling characters, some fluid and some all-star vote outs, and this overwhelming sense of 2 sides really do highlight this to be such a great season. It's entertaining, it's fun, it's dramatic, it is memeable, quotable, all those things. Does it rank top 5? I'm not sure. But it
Hell
definitely
yeah,
is.
it does. What do you mean, Davey?
I'm not sure.
Christian alone brings it to top 5.
Hashtag cancel Davey. Pass it on.
I'm just saying, I think some people may look at it to be overrated, and some people will really enjoy it for what it is, to be this compelling aspect.
Some of those people are wrong. That's all I'm saying.
Teach their own.
Ben, like I said, as the person that has watched this for the first time, do you feel like going into Edge of Extinction, which was next for you, did you feel like this set the bar pretty high going into third? Okay, and so the next question is, the next returnee season is Winners at Winners at War for you. Do you feel like the bar that David vs. Goliath set? Do you feel like Winners at War has to live up to that one, or do you put returnee seasons in their own category?
I kind of combine it all in one in my head, and I expect Winners of War to be better, even better.
Are you excited to see Nick again?
I just think that you know who I'm actually really excited to see is Yule. I'm excited to see Yule.
Good.
That's a great answer.
That's beautiful, Ben. Good job.
No, but I think that it certainly set the bar high. It was probably the best season of the 30s that I watched for sure. Top 10, I'd go with. I don't know if I'd go top 5 though.
Julia?
Yeah, I would agree. I always think it's interesting because I'll look at what's the next season that Ben's about to start. And some of them immediately you remember these huge moments or these huge characters. And some it's I don't even know who won this season. I have to go back and look that up. And this season, I will say, based off just first watch, which was years ago because it was when it was on live TV, he said David versus Goliath. And I just remember oh my God, it's Christian time. And I think that's what I was so excited for this season, which I think I'm biased in liking the season because I like him so much as a player on it. And I think the fact of when you're most excited for a season, not because of who wins or not even who makes it to final 3, I think as a season, it's fine, but some of the people on it, particularly Christian, just make the whole viewing experience so much more enjoyable because I just adore him so much.
See, that's how Tyson is for me. Like Tyson, I could watch any season. Tyson's on, it's going to be incredible.
Emily.
What?
God. Where do you rank this season?
Oh my God, everyone knows. Like, it's definitely in my top 5. I'm absolutely obsessed. I love it for the same reason that Julia loves it. I think that Christian had an incredible season. There's not a doubt in my mind that he's gonna eventually come back for a fan favorite season if they can convince him enough. And I will be literally wearing a Christian shirt the whole time. The other thing that I have to say about this before I forget, because I've been trying to insert myself awkwardly into like half of this, is I would say that Mike White has one of the most incredible closing arguments that I've ever seen in Survivor history, where he argues and he's able to kind of blend and marry the concepts of like what it means to be a David and what it means to be a Goliath and exist in the exact same body. And I think that's like super, super cool. So, and to me, like, I mean, I saw all seasons kind of similar to you, Ben. Like, I jumped right back into Survivor, like, during COVID. So I watched most of the seasons back to back to back. And, like, to me, that's one of the, like, arguments that will always stick in my mind in Final Tribal is exactly what he said. So to me, because there's so many memorable seasons, so many strategically utilized advantages that actually freaking work. Like, yeah. It's a 10 out of 10 for me, easily.
All right, so I've got 2 things as we head off. One, when we had Mama C on here for Worlds Apart, I asked her, does production sit there and make you say, oh yeah, as a white collar this or as a blue collar that? And she said, no, we just kind of embodied what we had been given and said it a lot. Watching this season, I will say that one thing that really aggravated me was the fact that people kept bringing up, well, as a David this and as a Goliath this, to the point where, once again, I need to know, are these people prodding you to announce yourself as this, or are you, as they did on Worlds Apart, are you just embracing this role so much that it becomes your personality for the 39 days that you were out there? But I will say that's my only qualm with this season. This is my favorite newbie season in the new age of Survivor. I will say that in the 30s, for the longest time, Cambodia was my favorite season. David versus Goliath, it's got to be right there with it. Like, I'm giving 4.75 out of 5, which I've only given that to Cagayan and Cambodia. As far as seasons, Heroes of Stone says 5 because it'll always have 5. But I really love this season. People that we didn't even get a chance to talk about: Davey, obviously, Gabby, Carl, and the Bing. Yes, you have your Bing there. Not a big fan of Dan, but whatever. I love John, the mayor of Slamtown. Who am I missing? Shoot. I feel like there's another really big name that I'm missing, and I can't for the life of me remember.
Gabby, the queen.
I already said Gabby. Alec. Oh. And my favorite Alec moment is the 5-hour challenge against Christian. Dude, you're still going.
I adore that moment so much. He recites his PhD thesis to keep himself entertained, and I love it. I love it. I know you're talking about it from Alec, but it just comes back to Christian. That is a Christian moment.
Well, Julia, Ben, and Davey, thank you all so much for coming on to this. I know we ended up going a little longer than I planned on, but I hope that you guys enjoyed it. For everyone else listening that has been following me on this journey, once again, Season 42, I will be doing a live stream from beginning to end on Sunday. I will be inviting back everyone that has been on any of these episodes so far, even if they want to pop in for 2 minutes to say they hate a certain thing, by all means. But I appreciate everyone continuing to reach out, all the well, why are you still doing this things. And I honestly do appreciate it. And we will see everyone after, and I'm really excited to rewatch this season. I will see everyone after Edge of Extinction.